Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is terrorist leadership and their role in recruiting and sustaining their terror mission. I'm thinking about Yahya Sinwar. With the blessed sudden demise of the arch-evil Hamas terror leader, Yahya Sinwar, it is worthwhile examining the rise of terror organizations and brutal, evil, yet charming leaders who command them. Sinwar was the mastermind not only of October 7th, the massacre of October 7th, but also of numerous other terror attacks against Jews and Israelis. He believed that the only way to help the Palestinian cause was through all-out frontal attacks against Israel. He would often say, only through armed struggle will the Palestinians be free. Yahya Sinwar was charismatic. He was dynamic. He was a powerful speaker. He was a man of action. And his character traits were no exception to those of many other terror leaders. Terror leaders emerge as leaders because they have certain character traits. These traits make them extremely effective at terror and at generating support, and most importantly, attracting followers to their cause. They operate on two levels. Obviously, they have the ability to attract the Shaheed, the terrorist who will willingly kill themselves in order to murder masses of innocent people, mass murderers. Just as importantly for their cause, they also attract many people who will not murder, but who will gleefully support the murder of innocents as an honorable defense, because they have been convinced that the Palestinians are, quote, in perilous situations. Supporters of the terrorists compose the much larger group. Yes, they are on the streets of Gaza. However, now, more and more, they are also on US and European campuses and on the streets of large metropolitan cities across the United States and Europe. Yahya Sinwar was a devout Sunni Muslim. He was a graduate of the Islamic University in Gaza with a BA in Arabic Studies. His mastery of the Quran was impressive. Sinwar achieved the level of Hafiz, someone who has memorized the entire Quran. That's all 77,797 words. A woman, by the way, who reaches this level is called a Hafizah in Arabic. Sinwar was also known as the Butcher of Khan Yunis. Khan Yunis is the city in which he was born. At that time, on October 19, 1962, the city of Khan Yunis was in Egypt. The moniker, the Butcher of Khan Yunis, was bestowed upon him because he tortured and brutally murdered Palestinians he believed to be collaborating with Israel. He admitted to strangling one with his bare hands, one with a keffiyeh, one accidentally while brutally torturing him, and one because his gun accidentally went off. After his confessions, he led his Israeli interrogators to the orchard where the bodies were buried. Sinwar spent 22 years in Israeli prison. Even while inside prison, he was also responsible for beheading 2 prisoners in the prison, whom he thought informed to the prison authorities. He told the prison guards to throw out the, quote, heads of the dogs, unquote. Despite all his murderous activity, and he is said to have murdered 11 more collaborators, Yahya Sinwar was released from Israeli prison in 2011, along with 1,026 other terrorists. They were exchanged for one Israeli soldier, Gilad Shalit. Those 22 years in Israeli prison became an academic graduate program for Sinwar. He sharpened his skills as a leader and a terrorist. He mastered Hebrew, taking online courses. He took at least 15 courses at the Open University on Judaism, Jewish history, rabbinics, Second Temple, Zionism, Holocaust, Israeli democracy, and more. He turned his prison time into a graduate school about his enemy, Israel and the Jews. While in prison, Sinwar translated books about terrorism and biographies of the heads of Israeli security services. From this, he learned counterterrorism. His translations were read and spread throughout the prison. He also wrote a novel while in prison. Not surprisingly, and most of you should know this, Adolf Hitler also wrote in prison. He wrote both volumes of Mein Kampf while he was in prison. Yasser Arafat, Hassan Nasrallah were similar personalities to Sinwar. They, like Sinwar, were capable and able to captivate and charm people into following their leadership and commit the murderous cause in the name of honor. Along the way to becoming terrorist leaders, they also personally amassed huge sums of money. The money was squirreled away for themselves. When Arafat died, the secret whereabouts of billions of dollars he had squirreled away died with him. Yasser Arafat, like Yahya Sinwar, had no compunction about approving and paying for the mass murder of Jews. For Arafat, like Sinwar, the only way to achieve the goal of a Palestinian state in his eyes was through violent uprising. As Arafat said time and time again, countries are not created, countries are fought for, and they emerge out of conflict. It's a very famous line of Arafat. The death of Yahya Sinwar is significant. By removing the head of the snake, the masses will be leaderless, opening up the opportunity for positive opportunities to emerge. Coming up next, Points of View. First up is a column from Ynet. It was published October 26, 2024, and it's written by Yossi Yehoshua. This column is entitled Strikes on Missiles and Defense Systems Send Iran a Powerful Signal. Subtitled, Commentary, Operation Days of Repentance hit key missile and defense targets in Iran. Though Tehran plays down damage, Israeli officials expect response as timing remains uncertain amid U.S. calls for restraint. Yossi Yehoshua begins, "This is one of Israel's most successful operations to date," a senior Israeli official told Ynet just hours after the outcomes of the IDF strikes in Iran began to unfold. "All designated targets were hit and damaged," he added. "It was a show of strength that has bolstered deterrence." The official acknowledged criticism from both coalition and opposition members over the decision not to target oil infrastructure and nuclear sites, despite weeks of mounting public expectations. Now Yehoshua explains that Israel's strategy was in the strike on Iran and what the strike achieved. He quotes a source in doing this. The logic here is not just deterrence, but also securing an advantage should further rounds of blows arise. The official continued, Iran's ground-to-ground missile production capabilities have been disrupted for a considerable period, a significant achievement. After this operation, Iran is left weaker, with compromised defenses and diminished production capacity. We've created new strategic room for action while enhancing deterrence, the source said. It is unlikely that Iranian authorities will publicly acknowledge the full extent of the damage inflicted, which reportedly includes hits to advanced air defense systems and the exposure and destruction of secret sites. According to sources in Tehran, speaking to local and international media, Israel targeted missile bases, an S-300 missile battery, critical to Iran's air defense, and the covert Parchin facility near the capital. Much of the damage, however, has been downplayed or concealed. Yet the fact remains, Iran, a nation, has threatened Israel's existence for decades, was attacked on its own soil, and sustained a strategic blow. Although nuclear and oil facilities remained untouched, Israeli officials described the decision to avoid these sites as reasonable and strategic, given key factors such as the critical partnership with the United States. Washington not only declined to join any nuclear-focused action, but also explicitly vetoed such an attack, opposing economic infrastructure strikes, especially on oil facilities, due to potential global economic fallout on the eve of consequential elections. Now Yehoshua concludes by quoting his source and explaining that the U.S. election will determine the future of the Middle East, of the region, not just with Iran. Yehoshua writes, "This operation was exactly as mandated by our political leadership," said the senior IDF official. "We were not directed to target Iran's nuclear capabilities or attempt to topple its regime. Given Iran's heightened alert, the results are favorable. Now the pivotal factor is the outcome of the U.S. presidential election and the next administration's policy on the Middle East. Although solving the nuclear issue was not anticipated at this stage, there is limited time left for action, and the new administration will need to engage. For now, Israel appears satisfied with U.S. backing and Iran's warning against retaliation. The dilemma for Iran's leadership remains: respond forcefully or contain the attack. Israel believes a response is likely, though its timing is uncertain, leaving tense days ahead. This is a very, very important analysis, which is why I read so much of it. Very important. Yossi Yehoshua is exceptional in trying to drive home exactly what transpired and what its results are. Next up is a column by Erfan Fard. He's Persian. It was published in the Jerusalem Post on October 27th, and the column is entitled "Iranian People Reject War and Defy the Regime's Warmongering Opinion." Subtitled, "For decades, the Islamic Republic regime has ruled Iran with an iron fist, relying on fear, suppression, and barbarism to maintain its grip on power." This is how he begins. The Islamic Republic of Iran stands on the precipice of collapse. After 45 years of tyranny, terrorism, and corruption, the regime faces mounting internal pressure from a disillusioned and oppressed populace. Its external ambitions of regional dominance and ideological war with Israel have only isolated it further. The future of the region, particularly the delicate balance between war and peace, hinges on how the coming months play out. The Iranian people, already fed up with a regime that has brought them nothing but misery, may finally be nearing the breaking point. For Israel, the moment presents both a grave threat and a golden opportunity to decisively weaken the regime and potentially help usher in a new chapter for Iran. The author explains how Iranian leadership has oppressed Iranians for decades. The Islamic Republic regime has ruled Iran with an iron fist, relying on fear, suppression, and barbarism to maintain its grip on power. The regime's ideology, rooted in Khomeiniism, has fostered an environment where dissent is crushed, freedoms are curtailed, and citizens' lives resemble those of hostages. The Iranian people are subjected to this tyranny, have no interest in the wars their government wages in their name. The people of Iran are victims of a regime's warmongering. They never asked for a war with Israel or a broader West, yet for 45 years they have been forced to endure the consequences of a government far more interested in exporting revolution and terrorism than in the welfare of its citizens. The Islamic regime has dragged the country into a quagmire of international isolation, crippling sanctions, and economic despair. The vast majority of Iranians do not support this war, nor do they harbor any enmity towards Israel or its people. Erfan spends significant time in the essay describing the nature and the style of rule and the oppression in Iran. He concludes that the time has come for change, that this is a perfect point in history where Iran has been seriously weakened and Iran might change. There might be an uprising. Erfan writes, "The Iranian people are fed up with a regime that offers them nothing but repression and misery, and they are ready for change. For Israel, the coming months represent a critical moment in history, a chance to not only defend itself from a regime's terror, but also to help create the conditions for a new, free, and democratic Iran. The collapse of the Islamic Republic will not only bring peace and stability to the Middle East, but also restore hope and dignity to the Iranian people. History is presenting a golden opportunity, one that must not be squandered. For the sake and the future of the region, the mullah's regime must be dismantled. Only then can the people of Iran and Israel celebrate not as adversaries, but as partners in peace and progress." Rarely, I must say, rarely do we get such insight into the real Iran. Thank you, Erfan. This is an excellent piece. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 7 cartoons and memes today. Some are really anti-Israel and anti-Bibi, and others are not. First up is a cartoon of Bibi Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, and the new Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian. They are playing a game called Power Slap. They are both standing on missiles. Bibi, the leader of Israel, slaps Pezeshkian, the leader of Iran. The second cartoon depicts an Israeli rocket and the exhaust smoke. In the exhaust smoke is the damage Israel caused. The title of the cartoon is Israel's Collateral Damage. In the smoke are people, the peace talks, a peace table, a dove of peace, and more. This next cartoon is terribly anti-Israel and anti-Bibi. Bibi is in the paper shredder. On top of the shredder is his hand and the person and destruction all around that person, and the words Gaza and Lebanon. The cartoon is entitled Emergency Stop. This fourth cartoon is Bibi's trophy wall with the heads of terror leaders that Israel has assassinated. They're mounted and posted on the wall behind him. Most recently, Yahya Sinwar on the far right, and Hassan Nasrallah on the far left. This meme is from the Daily Brine, and it is hilarious. A picture of Sinwar, and the caption reads, breaking, as in breaking news, Yahya Sinwar eliminated while fleeing from the river to the sea. That's funny. Now a meme. It is a Lego set called Gaza. All the pieces of Lego in the box are dull gray. The meaning is clear. Gaza is totally destroyed. Finally, a pick-me-up. It's a picture of a group of Israeli female soldiers, all smiling and posing with the Israeli flag. It's actually a beautiful, beautiful picture. Inspirational even. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. The Wall Street Journal reported, citing sources familiar with the details, that hours before the attack in Iran, Israel sent a warning to the Islamic Republic through Arab and European countries. According to these sources, the warning described the targets that Israel intended to hit and noted that if Iran were to respond, Israel's subsequent strikes would be more powerful. Israel denies this action totally. Iran's military announced that Israeli aircraft launched its overnight strike using airspace managed by the U.S. forces in Iraq, approximately 60 miles from the Iranian border. The Iranian military claimed that the strike targeted radar installations in the Ilam and the Khuzestan provinces, as well as areas near Tehran, causing minimal damage in some locations, with repairs ongoing at others. In a statement, Iran condemned the violation of international law and maintained that it has the legal and legitimate right to respond. Officials also renewed calls for a lasting ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon. Iran announced in a letter to UN Secretary General that it reserves the right to respond to the Zionist entity. They never say Israel. They call it the Zionist entity or the Zionist enemy. The criminal aggression. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told the United Nations Secretary General in a letter calling for an urgent Security Council meeting. Israel's IDF Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, held a situation assessment in the IDF headquarters after the Israeli response in Iran as part of the Operation Days of Repentance, Yemei Tshuva, it's called, and said, we hit strategic assets in Iran and used only some of our capabilities. The Iranian media outlet Fars, a news agency based in Iran, has reported the death of a civilian, a single civilian, following the Israeli Air Force attack in early hours of Saturday, which is the fifth Iranian casualty or fatality outside the 4 Iranian soldiers that were killed in the attack. It is remarkable that Israel sent 150 fighter jets and attacked dozens of targets with 1,000 rockets, and only 5 people were killed. 4 soldiers and 1 civilian. That's precision. During this raid, Israel targeted an Iranian solid fuel plant, crucial for the production of K-Bar and Elef rockets. The strike is said to have taken the facility completely offline, destroying around 20 of the fuel mixers, worth an estimated $2 million each. Sources familiar with Iran's missile industry told the media that the facility will likely require at least 2 years to resume operations, to fix it and get back up. The account of Iran's Supreme Leader, the X account of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei on X, which was formerly known as Twitter, where he tweets threats against Israel in Hebrew, has been suspended. Khamenei opened a Hebrew account recently and tweeted in Hebrew. He tweeted this: "The Zionist regime made a mistake and made a miscalculation regarding Iran. We will make it understand Iran's power, capability, and resolve." On a parallel note in Lebanon, the IDF reported it destroyed a strategic underground Hezbollah military facility in southern Lebanon using 400 metric tons of explosives. The 1.5 kilometer long or 1 mile long bunker, built over 15 years, held provisions for hundreds of fighters, including food, beds, power, anti-tank missiles, rockets, shoulder-fired missiles, mines, explosives, and much more. Forces from the elite combat engineering unit, Yahalom, engaged in clashes with the entrenched Hezbollah fighters during the operation, killing the terrorists and then blowing up the tunnel. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that most of the time spent in the army in war is just boring, sitting around and doing nothing? That includes even the most elite units of the IDF. They're without phones, and they are sitting, doing nothing. Well, not doing nothing. The Times of Israel was embedded with an elite unit that shows us what happens behind the scenes. These 6 minutes are very insightful. The film was done by Eli Katzoff, and he was embedded with the 81119th Reserve Battalion. The piece is thoughtful and insightful. I hope you enjoy.
So day to day, you try to have a general sense of order like you do at home, getting up in the morning, brushing your teeth. But every day is very, very dynamic. You don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. Operations are coming in all the time. Sometimes they're canceled. Sometimes you quickly prepare for a new operation.
The tour of the best bathroom in Gaza. Follow me. 2 or 3 months ago, one guy was shitting in a roof, and sniper shot him. This place is dangerous everywhere where you go.
So most of the people don't have phones in here. Some of the commanders do, but in general, between newspapers, playing cards, lots of backgammon and chess that people are playing and just talking, kind of going back to the things that we used to do. And that's why, the people with whom you serve here usually end up becoming your family for life, because you don't have the other distractions around you. That what you're going through with them, the way you process that, the way you speak all the time, it really builds special relationships for your entire life. There's also, just a lot of boredom. As much as we try to have a routine, it's kind of the opposite of routine. Sometimes your morning starts at 2 in the morning. Sometimes it'll start at 9 in the morning, depending what your job is, depending where you are in the rotation. So you sleep at kind of abnormal hours in definitely what are considered abnormal conditions. And within that, you try and build some sense of normalcy.
Ready? Let's go in. Go in. Now we're only going about a half kilometer, so about 500 meters. And what we're going to is where a few companies are running different operations in order to push the corridor further to the north.
Company.
Right, man.
With the binoculars, I look for snipers, enemy observers. You can pretty much focus onto buildings and windows, but the enemy knows how to do this stuff also, so it's kind of a battle brain.
The element of surprise is much greater on their part. The enemy has learned what we do. They're observing us from the area that you saw out there. You know, you have about 800 operatives there, and they're working together. They have observation equipment, and this is their home territory. They're waiting for us, okay, to make even the slightest mistake, and through that, they take advantage. And they, in their mind, they have all the time in the world, and so you see, as much as there's quote-unquote less action in front of us on a daily basis, with the element of surprise, it's created kind of, you know, a lot more suspense in what we're doing, knowing that this eerie quietness could explode on you at any point.
I have a PhD from the Hebrew University in International Relations, from Paris, France. Let's say that, you know, I came with a certain vision of what my life in Israel would be. There were some moments or experiences that I went through in the last month that I didn't think about. But I guess it's part of the Israeli dream now. And we know also that we are coming back to a country that is still divided and still hurting. And in a certain way, being isolated here in the middle of Gaza, so good protection against all these hard feelings that are important now and like very strong in the Israeli society right now.
It's very intense, very intense. I mean, it's not about causing as much destruction as we can. We're trying to avoid it, but sometimes I feel that we don't have any other alternative. We barely see a civilian population in here. First round, we saw a lot of them. It was heartbreaking, really. I mean, seeing all the people going from Gaza City down north, refugees, really. I mean, it's hard to see that. I'm hoping for the people of Gaza also that this situation will end.
The entire situation, even though I'll probably feel this way my entire life, is just completely heartbreaking from so many angles. I mean, just the whole 11 months are a lifetime of tragedies.
I think our families aren't happy we're here, but they understand why we're here. You know, you can't shed much of a positive light on a war. This is Israel defending itself and Hamas abiding by the ideology.
You fight for your home. You see your home. In the night, you see the light of Israel. And you remember why you're here.
I told you it was thoughtful and insightful. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.